So, Sam, we're very interested in pivotal moments that people have had in their careers that have really kind of shaped them or helped them take a big stride forward. Do you have any such moment that you want to share that has really kind of affected your career in some way?
Sure. I mean, it's sort of part of my, founding story, I guess. But there have been a series of big moments that sort of accumulated, and they really relate to the volatility that I experienced as a chief revenue officer when I was working as an operator. I'm an operator now, but as a CEO. But when I was an operating executive at VC-backed B2B startups from really 2003 to 2018, so 15 years, the thing that I experienced was that as I became more senior, my tenure kept shrinking. And I got fired a bunch of times. And so I worked at a place called GLG for 7.5 years. Then I worked at a place called Axial for 4.5 years. And then I worked at Livestream for 18 months. And then the last 2 stints were just 9 months and 10 months. And so, and 4 of those 5 times I was asked to leave. I did not decide to leave. And I think the most pivotal was probably in 2017. I remember it because I wrote about it in my book, Friday the 13th, October 2017, when I was fired from my second to last company. And the reason that it was pivotal was really a mindset shift, because at that moment I just decided that I wasn't going to let it impact my professional trajectory. In fact, quite the contrary, I sort of decided I was going to use it as a catapult to establish some level of financial independence and to build some kind of business that could serve other people. And that was when I decided to professionalize what later became Pavilion, which is the business that I run today. And I decided it because I was frustrated with my own career volatility, but also because I recognized that volatility wasn't specific to me, but that the tenure for a go-to-market executive at a high-growth company kept shrinking. And the most recent data that we have is that it's just 17 months for CMOs and CROs. And so, when I think about inflection moments, inflection points, that was certainly one of them, October 2017. And certainly over the course of, I've been working on this full time since December 2018, so 6 years roughly. And there have been other strides in the last 6 years, particularly beginning at the end of 2022, because we're sort of coming out of a period of great volatility for the business. But the first one that comes to mind is 2017.
So it's part of why you started Pavilion. It wasn't called Pavilion then, but you already had, you were already running it on the side at the same time as you were a CRO?
I was running on the side, but it hadn't been monetized. It was, the two sort of central, and maybe now there's a third, but the fundamental, assumptions that underpin Pavilion, the community, is one of them is that careers are becoming more and more unstable, to the point of what I was just mentioning, which is average tenure. And it's not even just true for operating executives. It's also true for founders and CEOs that, have new ownership or are just going through difficult periods in their company's life cycle. And so they have their own volatility. So career volatility, at the same time that the amount of knowledge that's required, the subject matter scope and breadth to be a successful chief revenue officer, chief marketing officer, it's not just that it's so expansive, it's that it changes, virtually by the day, if not by, the week or the month. And so there's no possible way for any one person to know all of the things they're supposed to know in an operating executive role, particularly in a go-to-market function. And so Pavilion exists to provide some kind of peer-based support so that people can have access to the information they need to be better at their jobs, and also so that they can have connective tissue between jobs so that they can have the skills, the tools, the resources they need to build a career. And then I guess the last thing that, the last reason that we exist is really to help people build good companies, because we think that if we help people build good companies, they in turn will have more security and stability in their lives. So all of that, it was free at the time. I was doing it on the side. And then that was the moment that I said, okay, I need to make this into a business. And January 1st, 2018 was when we first started charging dues.
So you went from being a sales leader to running your own business, which is a community, very successful community. I feel like every week I speak to different kind of go-to-market leaders and executives, and so many of them are members, or they go to your events and whatnot. So I want to ask you also about good advice for building a community. because I think that it's very related to what a lot of our customers are doing. It's very related to how you manage and work with your customers and recurring revenue and all these things. And a lot of companies are trying to dip their feet into kind of having their own communities and things like that. So what do you think are some good kind of tangible advice for people that are looking to also have a successful community?
Well, my framework for building communities is, I call it the 3 Ps, the right purpose, the right people, and the right places, which is really a way of adding a third P, because it's really about the experiences that you create. But the biggest mistake people make is that they don't have the first one, which is the purpose. There's no reason that the community exists except to sell people in the community the stuff that company is building. Yeah. And I think that in the modern world, particularly, I guess really over the last 200 years given the rise of advertising, but people are well aware of when they're being sold to, and they're well aware of when they're being traded transactionally, and they're highly, highly resistant to it. And so most companies which is true of all marketing, right? People, the challenge of being a CMO in the modern world is that you have weekly, monthly, quarterly pipeline targets and lead targets, but the real way to build trust is not to try and be transactional with people, but to build relationships. So again, the first mistake I see people make, particularly even people that are trying to make community as a business, is that they don't have a reason why the community exists. Pavilion has a reason why it exists, as I just mentioned. It has the purpose of it is to help people unlock and achieve their professional potential and to help people build great companies. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the people, which sounds sort of obvious, but it's a lesson that I've learned time and time again, which is that you have to have a very clear definition on who the people that you want in the community are. And you have to be very reluctant. It can't be for everybody, because that's not what community is all about. I mean, it sort of depends. There has to be some kind of unifying theme that aligns people. And I've seen communities fail, including ours at times, when we've tried to grow too quickly and we've tried to let everybody in. And when you let everybody in, you dilute the quality of the conversation that like-minded people are prone to have when they get together and meet other people that they like and respect. So, and then the last piece of it, I would say, is non-curated experiences, just throwing people into a room, doing stuff that's not very thoughtful. But the most important lesson, I would say, is do you have a reason why the community exists besides selling them your software? And do you have the right people, and are you very specific on, what we would call your ICP, your ideal customer profile? And when you have those two things in place, typically you can do something really well. And when people do them poorly, again, it's because they're doing it, great CMOs, one of my friend, his name's Kyle Lacey. He's the CMO of a company called Jellyfish. And he says, I think his number's 15%, but he says, 15% of my budget is for stuff that there's no attribution around, that I'm not gonna provide attribution to it. The minute that you try to provide attribution, meaning like, what's the dollar value, and assigning a target. If you assign a pipeline target to a community that you're building, you're gonna mess it up.
Yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense.
It makes sense. It's just so hard to do because every CFO says, I'm giving you this money.
I know.
What's the return? And so there's this conflicting pressure, and the companies that succeed, they can take just a much longer term view and say, it's going to pay you back. You just have to trust me.
Yeah. And not being transactional. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not a SaaS business, it's not a software that you sell, but it's very much a recurring revenue business.
We aspire to have it be recurring at least. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, like we all do. But and I spoke to someone a little while ago from Chief, which is also a New York-based community, and they actually have a customer success team. So they have people in-house that work with driving outcomes with their customers and reviewing the customers and whatnot. How do you do that at Pavilion? How do you think about keeping your customers around and having them grow with you? And what's your kind of strategy there? And
again, it starts with, why do we exist? We think a lot about what we call the member journey, and we actually have this thing that we call the good path. So the good path is, and this is true for many communities, but the good path is, what is the path that we want somebody to be walking along that will give them the right experiences at the right time so that they're getting the right level of value from their membership. And we think very carefully about it. And so all of it, which is these are all lessons that are true for any recurring revenue business, any business that seeks to have return customers. How do you get return customers? The first thing is you need to have a clear picture of who do you want to be your customer, because you can't build an experience for 50 million different kinds of people. Yeah. So that's thing number one. And that starts from the moment that they come to the website. The moment they come to the website, the messaging has to align with the product that you ultimately deliver. Again, this isn't specific to communities. This is specific to anything, right?
Yeah, it's your ICP. Yeah.
The right people show up, they get the right message, they have the right expectations, and then they join. And then the next thing that happens is they need to be onboarded properly. And the onboarding has to be not overwhelming and very prescriptive in terms of these are the things that we think you should do in order to get value from the membership. Now, what underpins our belief and our knowledge on what things you should do? Data. So the first thing you have to do is you need a data foundation that tells you this is where people act and behave, and these are the mechanisms and behaviors that lead to renewal, that lead to high value. Yeah. Because otherwise, the biggest problem that many companies, but especially community businesses and membership organizations, suffer from is they often feel like they need to do more, especially if it's a bundled offering. They feel like they have to put more into the membership because, maybe one more thing, maybe one more average experience will lead to a higher retention rate and to a happier member. Turns out that that's not typically what is needed. Most of the time, actually, you need fewer experiences, but you need the right experiences. And the only way for you to know what the right experiences are is to have data. So if you have data, then you can drive people to those experiences through the onboarding, and then they're off on their journey. And then it's about data to drive interventions when you feel like they're drifting off of the good path into some place that might lead to low value. So all of that is to say, we have a community team as well, which is basically our customer success organization. Yeah. But we're also very, very operational in the sense that we are trying to get as much data into our platform as possible so that we can trigger the right intervention, the right engagement with the member and say, you should meet this person, you should attend this event, you should take this course, because we know that sequence of things leads to a higher predictability of happiness, which ultimately will lead to renewal. Yep. So that's how we do it.
You're driving adoption. You're
driving the right kind of adoption, not any kind of adoption. And again, like the mistake that I see people make is twofold. One is like they just add more stuff because they think it's like a pricing and packaging failure, which is leading to low retention and high churn. And most of the time, you don't need more stuff. You need fewer stuff. But you also need to be very prescriptive about what those things are. And then the second thing, the biggest reason, is what we call failure to launch, which just means poor onboarding. Yeah. It just means you didn't ever grab the person. And oftentimes, again, the last thing I'll say is there's, especially, if you're suffering from high churn or low retention, there's a defensiveness that comes into your tenor with people where you're nervous about telling them what to do because you're worried that they'll not like you and then they won't renew. And there needs to be a confidence, particularly with community. There needs to be a confidence that says, I get that you paid us money. We're grateful for it. But this is how you need to behave. And this is how you need to act. And these are the things that you need to do. And if you don't do these things and if you don't behave this way, then you're not going to get value and you're also going to impact the value that other people have. And there's a confidence when you deliver that message that comes from the data, comes from you knowing that you're right. And if you're too defensive, and by defensive, I mean, well, what do you want to do? And what are you trying to accomplish? And I'll build 5 different paths for 5 different use cases. That's not how it should work within the membership. Yeah.
So interesting. It's like any other...
it's not different from any product.
It's like how I would speak about our customers too.
Align expectations, deliver against those expectations.
Yeah. And look at the data and use the data to make decisions and to kind of push customers through the journey.
Right.
So I know you offer a lot of courses and things like that as well. Is that what makes your customers more sticky when they take some of the courses versus if...
No.
Or is it when they're active in...
I think
what is it?
There's a couple different pieces that create stickiness. At the most. So first of all, it's really interesting. First of all, it depends is the answer. There are certain quote unquote communities that are really less communities and more content businesses. They are positioned as educational businesses, and for those businesses, creating more content, meaning more courses, can lead to renewal, and the customer joins the organization because they are anticipating that there will be a certain volume of new content created that they can consume to make them better at their job. So the best example of that business is Reforge. Reforge does an amazing job with growth marketing and with product. Specifically, they train product managers, but it's not a community. It's not a community. It's an educational program. And so to renew in Reforge, you need more courses. Yep. And so Brian spends a lot of time building new content for the community, creating new types of content, new ways of consuming content. What we found is that content for us, meaning courses, is demand gen. It gets people in, but it doesn't renew them. And it can be very tricky, actually, because if people join to take a course to the point of recurring, they may not view the relationship as recurring. If I join to take a class and then I take the class, I might be very happy, but I might still churn. And so the content for us, it does enhance the offering, but what it really does is solidify to the point of purpose, people, and places. It solidifies the purpose. What's the reason why we are all here? We're all here to have a specific point of view and methodology on how to build great businesses. And the content aligns us all as within the community around that. But to the point, what's the thing that drives renewal? The thing that drives renewal is meaningful relationships with other members. And so the thing that drives...
Can you track that though?
Yeah. Well, we can infer it. And we infer it from their attendance at our events. So we run 200 salon-style thought leadership dinners, what used to be called Jeffersonian dinners, now I'll call them Pavilion dinners, around the world every year. And those are highly curated and highly moderated in a very specific format that we've developed. So that drives retention. Attending our big events drives retention, and then making one-on-one connections both through our online platform, but also just in person through these connections that we make. All of that tends to drive renewal much more than content. So, and I think Facebook had this idea, back in the old days that if you connected with 6 or 7 people you knew, there was some magic number that when you first signed into Facebook, if you connected with that number of people, then you were much more likely to come back and become for them, a daily active user. For us, it's very similar. If you can create, and it's not 2 or 3, it's probably about 5 or 6. If you can build 5 or just enough so that it's hard for you to manage on your own. If you find one best friend on Pavilion, it doesn't really lead you to renew because you'll just become friends with that person outside of Pavilion. But if there's just enough people that it's just easier for you to manage those relationships through Pavilion, that's going to lead to renewal. And that's why, COVID was a great time for Pavilion specifically because everything moved online. And as a business, that's much higher margin. And as we move off of COVID into real life, we realize we are an events business. And that events business is lower margin than just doing Zooms all day. But that's what people want. They want to meet in person. They want to connect in person. That's what we deliver. Yeah.
Did Pavilion have a COVID boost? Were more people seeking out community?
We grew tremendously through COVID. And that ultimately led to our fundraising. We raised $25 million 3 years ago. And it was mostly due to the growth that happened during COVID. Yeah. And, we learned a lot. In the last 3 years. I don't regret raising the money, but it's certainly, I have a strong point of view that we didn't raise venture capital. It's really growth equity, but I don't think community is a venture capital business, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because of what you just said. Does it pressure you to be more transactional? Or?
Exactly. The point of venture capital is grow very quickly, very fast. And who wants to join an exclusive club that's letting everybody in because they have a growth target? Yeah.
Or you pushing things, upselling your members.
If the point of your exclusive club is we want to sign up as many people as possible, it's not going to be very exclusive for very long. Yeah. That doesn't mean it can't, there's great businesses that have raised money. It's just not, it's not venture scale. We can become a very, very large community. We can be 100,000 people or 1 million people over, but it'll take 20 years. It's not going to happen next year. Yeah.
I heard you say in your podcast that you had to make kind of some tough decisions in the last year to reach profitability. Yeah. Maybe also because of the funding. And you have that in common with many tech companies in the last year, especially. But what do you think is the future? And you touched upon that a little bit. Like, what are the goals that you have for Pavilion? But what do you think is the future of community? Like, how is community going to continue to grow and evolve? You think?
Our future is really not, there's nothing rocket science about it. It is making sure that we're very clear on who we serve and that we're doing everything we can to help those people become successful. And if we do those things, we will be successful. And I would say that the only wrinkle is just creating the right membership tiers for the right type of operating executive. And what I mean by that is just being really, really focused on, we want to be the best, we want to be the elite go-to-market community around the world. And to do that, we need to make sure that there's a level of membership that is only for elite people. I think there's a pavilion for everyone, but there's going to be a pavilion specifically for the very, very best operators that's going to be purely invitation only. I think the future for community is really embodying
more exclusive.
It's just the right people. It's just the right, it's purpose, people, places. It's every community is learning, including, the one that you mentioned earlier, who everybody needs a reason why they exist, and they need a roadmap that informs that reason. And they need a point of view, and then they need to make really, really sure that the right people are joining the community. And when I've seen companies stumble and communities stumble again, it starts with, why do you exist? And if the reason why you exist is, I thought I went to HBS and I thought I should be a founder and this felt like a good business to found, in the short term, you probably won't be successful. At some point, you'll get humility and religion, and then you'll probably transform your business. And, that happened to us too.
Yeah. You also wrote a book, Sam, that's called Kind Folks Finish First.
Indeed.
It's about how with leaders that have a lot of empathy and kindness and compassion have better results.
Yeah.
I thought this was super interesting because I've been in B2B SaaS and tech and sales for almost 15 years. So I've spent more time than I would like to admit, duking it out with different people over God knows what. And I feel like people are trying to one up each other in who is the most ruthless. Sometimes I've also been an active participant in a lot of those things. So I want to be honest with that too. But I think that's why I find it so kind of a refreshing take. It's silly that you find kindness to be, a new take. But what spurred you to write this book? And because I think a lot of these things are also a lot of things that you are building Pavilion on as well. Like you think a lot about this in your leadership.
I'm trying to, I'm not perfect. And there's lots of people, around the world that have a different opinion of me than is embodied in the title of the book. And the point isn't that this is the only path to success. The point is, it is a path. It is a choice that you can make. And so embodied in sort of the foundational point of Pavilion is that this business literally emerged from me having dinner with people once a quarter in New York, here in New York City, and trying to help them find jobs and trying to help connect them to resources and trying to give them information that they needed to manage their lives better, and not asking for anything in return. As I mentioned, for most of the beginning couple of years, Pavilion was free. And so there's kind of like three principles, I think. One is build relationships, not transactions. One is, play a big, long game, not a short, small game, which is another way of saying don't be transactional. And, I guess the third is look to offer support and help before you ask for help and support from other people. All of it is a way of saying, some people assume that being ruthless is the only way to be successful in business. And, honestly, maybe it is the only way to be successful to build a multi-billion-dollar business, because Pavilion certainly isn't that. And it certainly seems like Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs and Henry Ford all have an element of ruthlessness to them. So, but for me, the point of the book is really that level of humility of saying, listen, this is just for me. I'm just telling you, for me, that this has worked. And this is a way that it can work. And one of the reasons is because it's specifically, even if you're trying to be competitively commercial, it's differentiating. And that's one of the points that I make in the book, that if everybody's being transactional, then you can look different and be different and separate yourself by simply not being transactional. If everybody's being a ruthless bastard and only looking out for themselves, then just by you offering support and not needing anything in return and not immediately sending an invoice and not immediately saying, what have you done for me? You just look different. And there's this, this adage, and I don't even know that it is in the Bible, but it's some version of it is, which is, to he or she who hath much more shall be given. And the point is that, there's some, I guess, like, some new age, some spiritual principles that are a little, maybe silly to some people. They're certainly not cynical. And part of it is, this idea that gratitude is the frequency most harmonious with abundance in the universe. The point is that if you are somebody that gives and shares, you are somebody that apparently can afford to give and to share. And it literally creates an attractive force towards you that brings things, puts them in your way. So I guess it's,
Karma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's something I believe in. And again, it's not, in my experience is it works. It doesn't work as quickly as some people want, but it doesn't work slowly either.
Yeah.
And if you just play a very long game and you say, I'm willing for this to take 10 years, it won't take a quarter, but it usually won't take 10 years either. It'll happen quicker once you put yourself in that mindset.
Yeah. And I think it's so related to having a community as well to be helpful, right? Because that's how I think you want people to go into Pavilion, also being there not just to take, but also to give and help other people.
I have videos where I lecture them in the onboarding and I say, listen, you're expected to help.
Yeah.
This is not, it always comes across a little weird, but, I always say, like, I'm grateful for the money, thanks for your dues and for your subscription, but that's not all you're here to do. You're here to help other people. You can create the experience that other people have of Pavilion if you offer them support and help.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to indoctrinate them. I'm trying to brainwash them.
Good. Love it. And I think a lot of maybe more junior people that are more junior leaders or maybe like first time CEOs and whatnot have this notion that in order to build a successful company or even a successful team, being kind and compassionate doesn't work together with also having really high standards. Right? So, and I think that's, as people grow in their careers and more senior leaders often know that, like, you can be, have empathy with your team members and also expect a lot from them.
100%. And you can fire people. That's, having high standards and holding people accountable is a kind act. It's not unkind. Yeah. Kind is not the same thing as nice. And it's not the same, we've got Kim Scott speaking, at our event in Austin, Texas, this year. And, she talks about ruinous empathy is not radical candor. Ruinous empathy is you're so worried about offending somebody's feelings or hurting them that you don't tell them the truth. Yeah. And that impacts their ability to be successful. So kind is not the same thing as being nice. And I talk a little bit about that in the book. Yeah. And so, I agree with you.
Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of kind of subconscious bias, and people often then also associate more kind of a ruthless leadership behavior, sometimes as more successful. Like you list a bunch of leaders that kind of are known for that, right? I think there's also a lot of studies being made. This is also why women a lot of times get overlooked for leadership positions, because they don't seem or look like a leader, because you're expecting kind of a leader to be, to be kind of more aggressive, right, or whatnot. So I think it also brings, that to life a little bit.
And again, the reason I wrote, the joke that I make is, it's kind folks finish first in a zero interest rate environment. Maybe in a world of constrained capital, maybe you do have to be more ruthless. I don't know, but the point of the book is is to tell and empower people, men, women, anybody. Like, this is a path. And it doesn't mean be a pushover. And it doesn't mean don't advocate for yourself. Yep. It just means that you can help other people without constantly needing something in return, that you can focus on building long-term relationships as opposed to being transactional, and that will redound to your benefit. Most of the time people think that, like, doing the right thing is a sidebar. It's a detour from the path to success. And my point is, like, I think my career's been relatively successful. It sort of depends what your standards are. And it only became super successful when I started embodying these principles. And again, that does not mean that I think I'm better than anybody, or I'm a saint, or I'm without sin or flaw. I am full of sin. and moral turpitude. But but I do try. And that's sort of the message of the book.
Yeah. You've also spoken about how the traditional sales motion kind of no longer works. And I've been thinking a lot about this myself, and I think about it a little bit differently than you do. But I started, almost 15 years ago in tech sales as an IC, and then it was all, smile and dial, and you eat what you kill and whatnot. And now sometimes, I sit and I look around and I'm like, do the BDR need, a BDR manager and a BDR assistant? And, if there's a sales engineer doing the demo, what does the AE even do? I think about this all the time, and because there's definitely,
founders
a playbook
ask that.
now.
New founders always ask that. Why do you need a sales engineer? Shouldn't the salesperson know the product? And I always say, I wish that were true.
Depends, yeah. And the answer, I guess, it also depends on your product and your ACV and CAC and all these things. But I do think sometimes a lot of companies kind of just copy. Okay, this is how tech sales is done, so I'm just going to do it. While I don't think is necessarily right for all companies, right? But what are your thoughts on this? You're thinking about this a little bit differently in terms of maybe have a higher quality, as opposed to kind of throwing people at...
What I think, not to be too abstract, but what I think is that sales in general is hard to scale. And what do I mean by that? I mean that getting somebody's attention is a difficult thing. And in the modern world, our attention is scarce. And I was just listening to, a podcast with Ezra Klein where the woman was saying that on average, we're spending 47 seconds per screen before we switch to another screen. And that's the average, that's the mean. So the median is probably even less than that. The point is, if we're all doom scrolling on TikTok and Instagram, that getting our attention and maintaining our attention is by definition very, very difficult. And not only is it difficult, but it's sort of like COVID or any disease. We're going to develop immunity and resistance to any one particular strain. And so the only way to consistently get somebody's attention is to be changing the way that you get somebody's attention. So listen, 15 years ago when I was first leading sales teams, predictable revenue had just come out, and everybody started sending plain text emails with the subject line "right direction?" or "quick question?" or quick resend. We all had tactics, and people would write back. And they would write back because they hadn't seen those tactics before. Yeah. And now they have. And the first time somebody said, should I stay or should I go? Or, pick one of these three choices. And one of them is you're trapped underneath a refrigerator. That was funny the first time. Yeah. The 10 millionth time somebody sent that, it is no longer funny or entertaining. Yeah. And so my perspective isn't, do I have a moral point of view on outbound? No, of course not. I have a point of view on efficiency. Yeah. What I have a point of view on is, I don't want companies to go out of business, and I want them to use their dollars wisely and intelligently because they're precious. And so my point of view is, let's make sure that we have a point of view on how to the right way to spend money to get somebody's attention that leads to the right people having a conversation with us, that leads to people becoming customers. And that could mean a different thing for a different business. Now, what it tends to not mean, and so this is, if I ever had to, what was my first hit, my first big song for Coldplay, it was Yellow, but for me, it was this article I wrote on LinkedIn called "The Wrong Way to Scale," and the point of it is, the wrong way to scale is to hire a lot of salespeople, because you think that adding salespeople means you add money. But adding salespeople doesn't add money, it adds people that need leads. And if you don't know how to generate leads, then adding salespeople will only get you fired, ultimately, because you'll have a small team that's winning and go to a large team that's not winning. So, long-winded, rambling answer to the question, but the point is, my perspective is, let's figure out the most efficient ways to get somebody's attention and then to convert that attention into interest in what we're doing. And none of those things are particularly easy.
No, certainly not. And how do you do this at Pavilion? Do you work a lot with partnerships? Do you think that that's more in the future? That more businesses will work more with partnerships? Or
Yeah,
for sales?
Partner. Let's see. The number one way that we do it at Pavilion is organic word of mouth. So, so we try to create a great experience, and we try to get people to share about their experience on social media and with their friends. And we try to make it as easy as possible for them to refer their friends into the community if their friends are eligible. That's one of the things that we do. And then, yes, we do partner with lots of people. And so, we partner with Winning by Design, who teaches one of our highest rated courses, Revenue Architecture. We partner with Insight Partners, which is probably one of the most successful B2B SaaS investors in the world. They run their annual revenue conference inside of our revenue conference, which we call GTM 2024. So we partner with major investors, we partner with leading content providers and thought leaders, and then I guess the last thing, I don't know that this is a partnership, but certainly one of the keys to our success is what some might consider a franchise model, which is that we have chapters, and they're semi-autonomous. They're not fully autonomous, but semi-autonomous franchises where people run them to build and develop the communities within specific cities. And I think that's probably another part of our success.
Okay. And for a tech company, it would be also a little bit less transactional. Don't hire, a bunch of salespeople if you don't have leads, if you don't have a good recipe and a good...
Most of the time, for a tech company looking to grow, my point is, I don't have the perfect answer, but the question to answer is, how do I get a meeting? And a lot of people don't start there. And the answer to how I get a meeting tends to end up in the marketing department more than the sales department. Yep. And again, I can expand on this in boring, long-winded ways, but the point is, if I had to distill it, it would be invest in marketing before sales. And when I say invest in marketing, I don't mean demand gen. I mean invest in messaging, positioning your ICP, and then invest in content creation, and then invest in demand generation. All of that before you build out a massive sales team that doesn't have anything to do.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Sam, you are a very, very experienced podcast host, right? You have a podcast now called Top Line.
I did, yeah.
That I think is really good. And I am, a newer podcast host. So I figured now when I have, such a pro with me, what are your kind of best tips for someone like me, like a new podcast host? I know you guys curse a lot.
We don't curse anymore.
Oh, you don't curse anymore? Okay.
No, we stopped cursing.
Okay, so no cursing. Is that
we stopped cursing because my friend said I can't listen to your podcast while I'm driving my kids to school because of the cursing. And I said, that's a good...
I think
once you stop cursing, then it actually becomes quite glaring when people do curse. And it feels a little tacky, to be honest. I mean, I curse in real life, of course, but...
okay, no cursing is a good first.
I would say, it's like the same content advice I would give anybody. The first is, why are you doing it? Have a good, strong reason as to why you're doing it, and hopefully have something interesting to say. And I would say the last, which is not, again, it's, Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours. The point is, when people start posting on LinkedIn or creating any kind of content, they think that it is the act of creating one interesting piece of content that is the goal. Yeah. And that is not the goal. The goal is to show up and do it consistently with no expectation of anything happening for 10 years. Yeah. And, you see people that start to post on LinkedIn and they're like, I just wrote this great post. I spent 5 days on it. I'm like, okay, nobody's going to read it. It's really about posting every day, not about having one great idea. If you're a band, it's not about your ability to write one great song. It's about your ability to put out great albums for years. So my advice is just don't stop. If you think that you've got something interesting going and you've got an interesting conversation, an interesting point of view, then plan on doing it for a very long time, and don't treat it transactionally. Yeah,
that's your whole thing. 10,000 hours of podcasting. So maybe by 2055, I'll be.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little depressing sometimes, but that you have to go into it. That's the point. That's the karmic sort of approach. It's not going to happen overnight. It won't take 10 years, but if you think that it'll take 10 years, when it takes 2 years, you'll be happily surprised.
5, yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Sam. It's been amazing having you here. It's been amazing talking to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to be here.